Books teach us, they inspire us, they challenge us, and they expand our horizons. Books contain the best thoughts of the greatest minds in history, but the problem is, there are millions to choose from. So what should you invest your time reading? What should you spend your money on? How do you sort through all the bullshit and find the good shit? You let the superior men do the work. Matt and Jay take the best books, pick the most important points, and distill them down to a concentrated 30-minute podcast. We help you find the books you need to read and why you need to read them. You may even learn something. So take out your coffee, tea, a glass of wine, or a good IPA. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Welcome to the Superior Men Bookcast.
Welcome back to the Superior Men Bookcast. I am your host, Jay, here with my fellow host, Sir Matthew.
Good day, everybody.
And good day to all of you book lovers out there. Today we are talking about the incredible book, 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos by Jordan Peterson. Matt, what is this book about?
So this is great, and we've been holding off kind of doing a podcast on, or a bookcast on this, just because of how daunting this book is, really, and we both really enjoy it. It is, yeah, it's a little daunting. It's a fantastic read, but really, this. If ever there was a handbook for life, and here's a rule book for life, like this really is it. It's like, here, read this. This should be required reading, like in, I don't know, middle school or something. But really hands down practical advice for everybody, and just sort of in these 12 different rules on how to live your life.
Oh man, these are, you said it, it's like handbook for living. That's really what it is. It's like, what does he set out to do? It's like kind of distill down 12 basic rules to live in the modern world. And I really do feel like it's modern world stuff. I mean, you could probably go back 100 years or 200 years and a lot of it would be relevant, and philosophically it goes back thousands of years. But what we're looking at here it deals with some pretty challenging things that are fairly new.
Skateboarding. That's one of the rules, right? Don't bother children when they're skateboarding. If we said that 500 years ago, people would probably burn us at the stake or something.
What exactly? What are you doing?
Yeah,
however, pet a cat when you see it on the street. Cat's been around for a bit.
That is true. That's very true.
Yeah. Except maybe in ancient Egypt, you wouldn't do that, or you'd also be burned at the stake because they're,
Right. So who's
deity?
Who's going to benefit the most out of this book?
I would say anyone who wants to understand why people do what they do. It's just it helps to, because he's a psychologist and not just a guy that sits in a room and listens to people talk. Like, he's an actual clinical psychologist, so he understands how people work in a way that very few people do. So that anybody that wants to improve their philosophy, the paradigm, just get better at life, and if you like to learn, man, this is going to help you learn. Who is it not for?
Well, basically, just if you don't want to think about anything, you're very closed-minded to figuring out what's going on in the world. Not gonna work out so much for you either. If you can't challenge your own mindset with things, this is not gonna work. So, all right. So, how about this book? Let's see. How difficult is this book to read, Jay?
Honestly, of the books that we've had on our bookcast so far, probably just in terms of absorbing the material and the difficulty, and especially sometimes the emotional difficulty of the material, like we're getting to the Gulag Archipelago and some of the dark parts of human nature and some stories of suicide and things like that. It's difficult.
Right.
It's difficult reading.
Yeah, it is, and totally worth it. but it is difficult, and I actually recommend if you get overwhelmed, just you sort of take it in the different chunks. It's already separated out with the 12 rules, so you should be pretty good there. About 416 pages long. Probably, if you were to sit down and just read through the whole thing, which I wouldn't recommend. I think this is a study book, but 12-ish, 14 hours. Audio's just under 16 hours, the audiobook. So that's something else to look at too.
It's gonna take you a little bit of time, but it's gonna be worth it. It is, like you're saying, if you go out, you can find 12 Rules for Life steady workbooks and breakdowns of this. No doubt it's being taught in colleges across the world, and we'll talk a little bit more about kind of some of the impacts of 12 Rules and Peterson's work throughout. But yeah, how well known is this book? Speaking of,
this really is a very, very well known book. There's I believe just under 6,000 reviews on Amazon, 4.6 stars out of 5. And I really want to see just the other people. Are you just shitting on it just because? So it came out in 2018, so about a year ago. It sold over 3 million copies. Currently number 2 on Amazon for ethics and morality, 3 on Amazon for applied psychology, number 1 in Audible for social philosophy, and number 54 overall in Audible, which is pretty impressive there. So, the book, if you haven't heard of it, I'd be kind of surprised. There's quite a bit. If you haven't heard of it, you're probably living under a rock or something. Just saying.
It's really interesting. This is the kind of book that I think you hear about before you really understand what you're hearing about.
Right.
At least that's kind of like how I found out about it. I think you had mentioned it. You're like, yeah, dude, you got to read this book.
Right.
And about the same time that you were telling me about it, I was hearing about it in various different men's circles and stuff. It's definitely one of those books that is pro-masculine, pro-man, and in a really positive way. And so in the men's circles like that, this book is, you find it a lot, and for good reason, because it takes the concept, some of the concept of modern feminism, and goes, look, these are not healthy
for anybody. That's the thing. They're not healthy for
society.
Anybody. Right. And I think that's really what it is. It's saying, look, there's a reason that we have a history, a human history. So there's a lot of benefits for it, because this is the way that we've been doing things for a long time, and it works out well because it has worked out well for a long time. We've
come up to this point not accidentally. We've
right.
worked for many years, many decades, and millennia in some cases for this. Yeah, to get to this point. How did you find out about the book, Matt?
I actually don't remember how I first heard about this. I probably heard it on some of the men's circles, is probably where I heard about this. I read this book when actually I first listened to the audiobook when it was first released. I had pre-ordered it, and I think it came out right around the same time as the text print is read by Jordan Peterson. So it was one of these things where I'm like, I'm all in for this.
Oh, that's cool. So you got it right at the very beginning.
And I'd seen some of his YouTube videos. So he'd had a few videos on YouTube with some of his lectures. And if you guys haven't ever seen any of those, just go on YouTube and search for Jordan Peterson. There's a ton. You'd never be so a little, you never think that you'd go back to college intentionally to go and listen to a lecture, but this is his stuff is awesome.
Oh no, man! Incredible stuff. So, quick bio here of Peterson. So he is a doctor clinical psychologist, cultural critic, professor of psychology at the University of Toronto. He was raised in the, in his words from his website, in the frigid wastelands of northern Alberta. And if any of you have spent quality time in Canada, especially northern Canada, I think it all qualifies as frigid wastelands, doesn't it? Pretty much the whole country. He's been a dishwasher, gas jockey, bartender, short order cook, beekeeper, oil derrick bit retipper, plywood mill laborer, and railway line worker. And if you're noticing a theme on those of kind of blue collar, not particularly comfortable or easy jobs, that is a big theme throughout his writing.
Yes.
And that's, I think, very valuable to access. But then contrast that with 1993 to 1997, he was a teacher and researcher at Harvard, the Harvard, as an assistant and associate professor in the psychology department. Then afterward, he came back to Canada and took up his current post where he is currently at as a psychologist and lecturer teacher at University of Toronto. He published the book Maps of Meaning, The Architecture of Belief, which is where most of the stuff on YouTube came from. Like, that was the original part, probably where you first heard about it, Matt.
Right.
And kind of like put a lecture series in place there. And then that has grown, and now to the point he has over 2 million subscribers, hundreds of millions of views for his videos, and now he has a podcast as well, including academic celebrity guests such as Camille Paglia, Martin Daly, Ben Shapiro, Steven Pinker, many others. Traveled around the world as a lecturer. Has been on hundreds of television, radio shows, podcasts. He now argues people online and on television shows. You've probably seen some of those where, various different people will try and tear him down, and then he defends his various perspectives.
Doesn't usually work so well.
And it rarely does. It rarely does. Sometimes you'll see him slow a bit, but like his positions are so well thought out and so broad in their application and in their kind of historical context. It's hard to get over that. Oh, also a few other interesting things about him: flew a carbon fiber stunt plane, piloted a racing sailboat around Alcatraz, explored meteors with astronauts in Arizona. He wrote the new foreword to the 50th anniversary of the Gulag Archipelago, which is we'll talk about that a little bit later. His wife, 2 kids, granddaughter, etc., etc.
Yeah,
dude's pretty incredible.
Yep.
Pretty incredible. Matt, he wrote a book.
Yeah, so
which I guess we're talking about here.
This is kind of an interesting part too, because we're going to talk about some of the themes. Table of contents are big, and so there's 12. There's 12 rules. I actually think it's worth reading them. So normally I wouldn't, but so number 1, stand up straight with your shoulders back. He gives a lobster analogy with it, which is awesome. Treat yourself like someone you were responsible for helping. Basically, practice some self-care for this. Make friends with people who want the best for you. That's a tough thing for a lot of people, right? So, number 4, compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. That's one of the biggest. So good. Yeah, that's one of the biggest takeaways for me. Number 5, do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. Oh my goodness, as a father, I could not agree with that more. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world, and gives an analogy of make your bed, which that one's a great one. Pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. So that's the whole meaning of life idea, instead of just like, hey, I want to make a quick buck. Tell the truth, or at least don't lie. That's a great one. Again, another rule for life. Number 9, assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't. Who'd have thought maybe you need to listen to people, right? And number 10, be precise in your speech. I've not heard somebody more precise than Jordan Peterson. Instead of messing up whatever, he's very precise in what he says. Words have meaning, and use that. Number 11, what we talked about, right? Do not bother children while they are skateboarding. That one's great. Number 12, Jay's favorite rule, so go ahead.
Pet a cat when you encounter one on the street.
And that's just to stop and smell the roses, right? So make sure that you have that you are enjoying what is out there for life.
Man,
so
those are every one of those. It's so you're reading a good book with some serious value when just reading the table of contents you feel like you've learned something.
Right. No, it's totally true. Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into some of the questions here. So Mr. J, what did you like best about this book?
You know what I liked about it, and even going back through and prepping the bookcast, I got a really strong sense of this. Wherever you are currently, you are not seeing everything that's happening right now. You are subjective no matter how brilliant you are, no matter how much time that you've spent studying your situation. You're seeing things from a small, subjective perspective of the world. And there's a bigger perspective. There's a historical perspective. There's a community, cultural perspective. There's so many different things that can be applied to your situation and change it. So if you ever feel stuck, if you ever feel depressed, or if you ever feel overwhelmed or sad, or you feel like you can't make from point A to point B, this book, I feel like, gives you tools to help you look at things from a different perspective, and super powerful tools. And that's, I love that about this book.
Yeah, no, great. I could not agree more. I think it's great for whatever situation you're in. So, all right. Hey, so share a favorite quote or two that you have from this book, Jay.
All right. So I have two that I like. I really like. I like a bunch of them, but these are, man, they're so good. So first one's from Rule 8: tell the truth, or at least don't lie. Everyone needs a concrete, specific goal, an ambition, and a purpose to limit chaos and make intelligible sense of his or her life. But all such concrete goals can and should be subordinated to what might be considered a meta-goal, which is a way of approaching and formulating goals themselves. This is both pragmatic ambition and the most courageous of faiths. So, in other words, if you're having issues in your life, if you're having trouble, whatever's going on, you need an ambition or a specific thing that you're going after. But when you do that goal, how you do the goal and what you're trying to, the rules for accomplishing that goal are more important than the goal itself. So, like those two things, both. So that's one. And then Rule 11, do not bother children when they're skateboarding. If you think tough men are dangerous, wait until you see what weak men are capable of.
Yes. That's, one of our favorite quotes, right? With the, good times, bad times, weak men. That is, that's very, very true. So, what did you learn from this book, or whatever, maybe something profound that you took away from this book?
I learned a lot from this book. I really did. I think one of the things that I really learned from this book is how Peterson really makes psychology just so practical and connects it to so many different people in so many different situations and throughout history. I've been a fan of psychology. I took psychology in college, took a number of classes, and I read psychology books for fun, not textbooks per se, but kind of the subject of psychology is really interesting. And I don't think I've ever found a psychologist that cares so much about people and changing how people think about their own lives and improving their own lives. So I think that was, one of the things that I just really loved about it.
Awesome. Well, what's a critique? What did you like least?
It's kind of rough going, honestly, this book. It's pretty challenging, pretty complex, fairly high level psychology. As I was mentioning, I like reading that kind of stuff, but I do think 12 Rules is not for the casual reader. And if he could come up with a way of simplifying it, kind of like why we get fat and what we do about it, versus good calories, bad calories, I think that 12 Rules could be even more valuable for the average person.
Make the Reader's Digest version or something, right?
Yeah.
All right. So what question, or what is a question you would ask Jordan Peterson, Dr. Peterson?
You know what? I'd like to ask him a real light, real easy question. What's your belief in God?
Yeah, and it was a little surprising to me because there's a ton of biblical references in the book, a ton, which is part history, which is interesting too. But yeah, no, I see that because I think he talks about it without going into his personal beliefs.
Yes. Yeah, and I'd love to know where he comes from. You get the impression that he was raised in a kind of a Christian environment. At what level, he doesn't go deep into it, but definitely talks about how that was kind of the framework that he approached the world from. So yeah, I'd like to have that conversation with him. I think that'd be really valuable.
All right. What else? Any related books, connected books that you'd recommend?
Definitely, I would say his first book, Maps of Meaning, which I have not read. Have you read that one? His first book?
I have not. I have it.
Okay.
I haven't read it yet. It's about double the length of 12 Rules for Life.
Okay, so it's some nice light reading as well.
Yeah.
Maps of Meaning, The Architecture of Belief. That one I would like to read. And then I'm very excited about the upcoming sequel slated for this next year. In fact, looks like hopefully at the beginning of next year, 12 More Rules for Life, Beyond Mere Order. So slated for 2020. Yeah. I'm very excited about that one.
Awesome.
All right. Let's turn the tables here, Mr. Matthew. What about you? What did you like best about this book?
What I really liked is that basically wherever you are, whoever you are, you can take this and gain from it. You can better your position, better your life, better your surroundings, your quality, everything with this book. Whether you're 20 years old or 15 years old or shoot, like I said, middle school, like 12 years old or 80 years old, I think you would have something to gain out of this, which if you're willing to kind of go into it and really read it for what it is, I think you can gain something out of it no matter who you are.
Oh man, there's 100% agree. And it's the kind of thing where like you go back later and read it and you'd be like, and now there's more for me.
Right.
So good. What about a favorite quote or two?
I got a couple. So first one here, meaning signifies that you are in the right place at the right time, properly balanced between order and chaos, where everything lines up as best it can at the moment. When is expedient works only for the moment. It's immediate, impulsive, and limited. What is meaningful, by contrast, is the organization of what otherwise merely be expedient into a symphony of being. But really that contrasting what is meaningful versus what is expedient. Love that quote.
That's great.
And so another one, too, is you can only find out what you actually believe rather than what you think you believe by watching how you act. You simply don't know what you believe before that. You are too complex to understand yourself. And it's what I like about that one is it's really looking at your judging yourself based on how you actually are and judging people by their actions rather than what they're saying. So fun quote too. I like both of those.
Oh, that's good. And comes back to that concept that is throughout this book and, kind of even what I was mentioning earlier, that idea of like, we're only have just a small amount of knowledge about what's going on at any given time, especially about ourselves.
Right.
So what did you learn from this book? Or how did it change you? Either one.
So what I like is what I've learned is rule number one I love, which is stand up straight with your shoulders back. It's how you are, how you present yourself means a ton. And it's that like ancient hive mind kind of thing. You're tapping into this thing of, you just see somebody, see their posture as they're walking around, and you instantly assume things. You have people who are hunched over, and they're the victims of crimes, where somebody who's sitting there with their head up, scanning, looking around, probably not so much victims of crimes. So it's a real ancient thing that you have in your brain. I really like that, just because I think it's so simple, but it's so profound at the same time.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of things like that in this book, right? You're like, oh yeah,
yep.
Look at that.
Totally.
Look at that. What did you like least about 12 Rules?
And really, I'm going to critique what you were saying, because I'm with you. I think it could be more open, but I don't think that it would be as meaningful if we really had if we dumbed it down. I really like how this book is how it presents it, even in the wordy language that it uses. I think the only thing is that I think it would be better to shape somebody and get them in the right mindset before they're reading the book, and coming in this and going, look, this is sort of a history lesson, part history lesson, part human history lesson. So, now with our woke culture, people would look at this and be like, oh, blah, 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 this guy's a chauvinist or something. And I think that may turn some people off. So I guess that would be my critique on that.
So the critique is maybe that you have to come in. It requires work from the individual to come in.
Right.
So it's more of a critique of the people, not the book.
Well, no, and I think from the book's perspective, I think it would be better to walk you into that a little bit more.
Okay, kind of like this is your instructions before reading, kind of.
Right, exactly.
Okay, I like it. What questions would you ask Peterson?
This was one I struggled with, because I can't. I really have a hard one on this, and maybe that's just because I've listened to a lot of what he said, but it would just be interesting to get more of his background and see more how he developed this through how he developed his philosophy based on maybe it was his practice or whatever. But I think that would be my thing. Just how
like how did he get to where he's at right now?
Especially coming up through Harvard and being at University of Toronto. Those are both very, very liberal institutions. So
right,
to come up,
he does not lean too liberal. He really doesn't. So yeah.
No.
That's really interesting. Okay, great question there. Any other connected books that you might recommend to others?
No, not other than the ones that you listed. So I agree with both of those.
Okay, gotcha. Well, so we got kind of a sense there of this is 12 Rules for Life: An Antidote to Chaos by Dr. Jordan Peterson. So this is a book that we feel basically everyone should read, and every man should absolutely read.
Right.
This is the kind of book that can really give you tools and ways of looking at your world, looking at yourself, that will make a difference. And
right.
It's worth the time to dig into it.
Any final thoughts, Matt? Yeah, if you've read this already, awesome. Have you given this book to somebody? Because if you haven't, you need to. I sort of at the same time that Jay was finding it already, I introduced him to the book. I've given this book a couple times already, which I think is really important. So I think that's what we need to be looking at. Like, if you've read this, give it to somebody. If you haven't read this, all right. Well, we're finishing up. Thank you very much for listening. Now go read this book.
Thanks so much, guys. 12 Rules for Life. Check it out. Share it with a friend. Thanks for listening to the Superior Men Bookcast. Stay superior.
A reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies. The man who never reads lives only one. Thank you for listening to the Superior Men Bookcast. Share it with a friend. You heard our thoughts. Go read it for yourself.